Listen, if you want to see a real transformation in your life, in the way that people treat you, entering your villain era is a very powerful way to do this. And this is especially true if you feel like you're done being comfortable and complacent and settling for less than you deserve and always putting other people's needs before your own. Hi, I'm Amber Mitchell, and this is the Where Do We Start podcast, where we talk about the stars, the self, and everything in between. And today I want to really get into the nitty gritty of entering your villain era, what that really means, and what that looks like from a spiritual perspective. Because if you're here, you're listening to this, then you know that you're at the point where love and light is just not going to cut it, right? It cannot always be all love and light. So we're really going to talk about what the villain era is. And I want to start off by talking about what it's not, because what the villain era is not just giving yourself permission to be mean and be a bitch and be immoral just because. And it's also not allowing yourself to be selfish and manipulative without any shame or remorse. I think that a lot of people, when they first hear the term villain era and think about it, of course, a lot of the time it is said kind of playfully, but a lot of people hear this term and they think of it from a very egotistical perspective. And I really don't think that that's the way that we should be approaching the villain era. And it's not the best way to do it. And, just kind of a few disclaimers, because the fact of the matter is entering your villain era might not be the most comfortable thing for you to do. And it's definitely not going to be very comfortable for the people around you, especially those who benefit from you not having as many boundaries and being a people pleaser. But I also think from that perspective of looking at it from an egotistical view, that it can get very easy to kind of get stuck in this era. And I say this as someone who has probably entered a villain era at least 3 times in my life. And I think it's important that you recognize it as a part of your journey, as an era. It's not something that you have to embody as a part of you forever, right? That gets really tiring unless you're like a Capricorn or a Scorpio. It's really tiring to be in that villain era energy all the time. But stick around to the end and we'll kind of talk about what that looks like once you're done with your villain era, once it's kind of served its purpose. But to start off, I want to say that the number one thing that's going to make people look at you like a villain, and that's really going to kind of piss people off, is when you set boundaries. And I mean limiting access to yourself, limiting how easily accessible your energy is to everyone else, being really picky about who you're giving your energy to. Because a huge part of entering your villain era is having more control over your energy. It's about protecting your energy, having more control over it. And this really puts people who want control of your energy at a disadvantage. Now, I think another key part of entering your villain era is setting your standards at a certain level, knowing exactly what it is that you're willing to accept and what you are not willing to accept. And people recognize this. They kind of see that shift in your energy when you do this. And I often say that people treat you however you allow them to, right? You show people how to treat you. And when people know that they can't just come to you with any old BS, they switch the way that they talk to you. They switch the way that they interact with you, especially when they see, because setting your standards means nothing if you're not actually enforcing that. So when they see that you have a certain standard of what you expect from people, and if they don't meet that, then you limit the access that they have to you. You limit whatever benefits came with that access. And this kind of leads me into my next point, which is that you have to recognize your value and the benefit that you bring to the people around you, the benefit that you bring to the world, because you are a valuable person. You have a unique characteristics about you. You have a unique personality and skills and talents and wisdom and knowledge and all these other things, right? You have an entire energy about you that is uniquely yours, and you have something, whether you realize this or not. I hope that by going through this process is something that helps you realize that you have something that is extremely valuable, and This is why it's so important that you protect your energy. This is why it's so important that you set your standards. And this is also why it's so important that you prioritize yourself so that you can be pouring into yourself, right? So that you are prioritizing your own mental health and your physical health and becoming a better version of yourself. And prioritizing yourself is definitely something that people around you who are used to you putting them first are not going to like. This is definitely one of those things that makes you look like the villain when you put yourself first. Entering your villain era really does require a shift of your energy, okay? And to do this, one of the important things that you want to shift is the way that you carry yourself, the confidence that you have, and specifically the language that you use, the way you speak to others and to yourself is extremely important. Being able to say no, I'm sure you knew that was coming. Being able to say no and say it confidently, right? Don't say it reluctantly, but like you mean it. Be able to say no when you want to, right? Also, stop over explaining yourself. As an Aries, that's one of the things that I hate the most is when I have to explain myself to someone, especially if like, you're not being affected by this. Why am I explaining to you what I'm doing or why I'm doing it? And so over explaining yourself, I think at some times, yes, people are owed, an explanation. Sometimes it is necessary to explain things to people, especially when they are being affected by them. But when it's not, cut the explanations. Don't over explain yourself. And the other thing is to stop apologizing so much. Now, again, of course, balance. I'm not telling you to just be mean and do awful things to people or even things that, maybe you didn't intend to do and not apologizing for them. I'm not telling you not to take accountability. But I'm saying that a lot of times we don't even realize that we apologize for things so often. You might not even notice that you say the word I'm sorry. Like you say I'm sorry so frequently. Like you might even start your conversations like, oh, I'm sorry, this and that. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm sorry that this, we apologize for our feelings a lot. We apologize for having emotional reactions to things and feeling a certain way. We tend to apologize just for taking up space. Being mindful is one thing, right? Being careful, cautious, and again, taking accountability. But don't apologize for having feelings. Don't apologize for taking up space. Don't apologize for taking time for yourself. And definitely don't apologize just to make other people feel comfortable. Now, probably the hardest part about entering your villain era is learning not to care what other people think about you. But the real tea on this is that no one is immune to other people's opinions. No one truly can say that they don't care what other people think about them. The key in this, when people who say this and mean it, is that they know themselves well enough to value their own self-perception over others. They know themselves well enough to have self-validation rather than requiring it from external things and people. And this also means that they are fearless enough. They have enough courage to do things that other people might see as a risk or that other people simply don't agree with. Now, the next point that I want to make, and this is probably the next hardest thing. So aside from learning not to care so much what people think about you. And really what that means is valuing your own self-perception and your own self-validation. The other hard thing is knowing exactly what you want and how to get it. I think that is kind of the essence of a villain era, really. If you think about any villain, like from, any movie or show that you watch, you realize that those villains, they always have a reason, right? They always have this like grand goal, this grand scheme or plot that they're trying to accomplish, and they know exactly what they want, right? They know exactly what they want, and they also probably know exactly how to get it. And they've also probably thought through process A, B, C, and D of how to get exactly what they want. That's what makes them good villains, right? So kind of thinking about it in this way of having whatever your goal is in mind, right? And working towards that privately. That's kind of a key. And why I say privately is because you don't want everyone everyone else's energy involved in what you're trying to do. This kind of goes back to the whole protecting your energy thing, as well as when you involve people in your plans, a lot of the time they take it upon themselves to add their own energy to it. And they often want to change things. And they often, even though they might even view this as being helpful to you, they have their own motivations. And there's obviously a reason why they would even want to help you, that it benefits them in some way. But being able to kind of work on things in a more private matter allows you to have full control over what that looks like. It allows you to protect the energy of it. Now, granted, of course, there are some things that will make more sense for you to involve people in. So depending on what your goals are, really think of it in that way. But just know that if it's something you really care about and really want to go a certain way, and you have your own vision for it, you want to protect that energy of it, and you want to keep that private. Now, in terms of knowing exactly what you want and how you're going to get it, an important part of that, of course, is why, right? Having a why. Like, why do you want to go into your villain era anyway? Why are you here at this point where you're like, okay, I'm done being nice, I'm going into my villain era? Many people enter their villain era because they want to get revenge. And I think if there's anything I've learned from Kendrick Lamar, is that that's not always a bad thing. Every villain story has its origin, the thing that kind of pushed them into, whatever started the beginning of that villain origin story, whatever pushed them to that point of no longer wanting to do things the nice way or the correct way. And so, yeah, it might be kind of a hot take, but I think that's perfectly okay. But I think it's important to understand that revenge is not, you hurt me, I'm gonna hurt you back worse. That's a very unevolved way to look at revenge, and we are not unevolved people. We are evolved spiritual beings over here. So recognize that that's a very ineffective way of doing things, and it gives you a temporary result that you want, but we want long-term results. And so because we are evolved, what we're doing is understanding our shadow and recognizing revenge as a way to alchemize our pain and suffering into something better. So there's two parts to this. Let's get into it. The first part, understanding the shadow. So the shadow is a place that you don't necessarily want to go, and understanding it from that psychological perspective, it's where there are a lot of subconscious, hidden, repressed energies. And so looking at this from the point of, you're entering your villain era because you want revenge. Okay, cool. What is it that you actually want? What is it that would make you happy? And when you ask yourself that question, you have to be able to reconcile with the first thing that comes up. And it really might not be a pretty thing that comes up, but that's okay. Understand that that is where your shadow went immediately. And you have the ability to go deeper beneath that emotion that first comes up and ask yourself what it is that you truly want. What is it that you would get out of that, right? So if someone hurt you and you just simply want to hurt them back, what do you actually get out of that? Is there enjoyment? Is there pleasure out of someone else being hurt? And what I've come to understand about revenge and forgiveness is that you have to take the other person out of the equation. Whatever it is that you feel as though you want out of this situation, right? Out of your revenge, take the other person out of that equation. If you can't get what you want without the other person, it's not even about you anymore. Now it's about them. Make it about you again. And trust that the way karma works, you don't have to do any of that heavy lifting, so stop trying. Stop trying to make sure someone gets their karma. They will. Now, the second part of this is reframing revenge, understanding it as alchemizing your pain into something better. You want revenge because you were hurt, because you were done wrong, and most likely you didn't deserve it. But know that your revenge can be your healing. Revenge doesn't have to be loud, doesn't have to be gaudy, doesn't have to be egotistical, doesn't have to be painful for another person. In fact, I think that those quiet victories are more often than not the most satisfying ones. Now, I did say that if you stuck around to the end, we'd kind of talk about how to shift out of the villain era. And really what I mean by this is kind of incorporating it into your life and being able to shift in and out of it when you need to. Because I know this is a big shift for people who are used to being people pleasers, who are used to not setting their boundaries very well. Being able to shift in and out of this energy is really important. Like I said, unless you're a Scorpio or a Capricorn, no one wants to sit in their villain energy 24/7. It's exhausting. So you have to be able to find balance in knowing when to, pull your energy back and when to give your energy graciously to others. I think there's a lot of really beautiful places that you can go from here, right? I think a nice step from your villain era is maybe a bit of a softer era, because I think in like a soft girl era, whatever people want to call it now, I think being in that more feminine era, that more soft era, allows you to be able to receive from others, whereas the villain era, for what it is, and a lot of people might also want to refer to it as like a dark feminine, there's a lot of masculine energy involved in a villain era, and that's okay, because if that's what's necessary, right? Pulling back your own energy, protecting your own energy, putting up boundaries, telling people no, focusing on yourself, but being able to shift to a place where with that as your foundation, you can be more receptive to support and easily receiving the things that you desire. I think that's a really good place to shift into. And maybe I'll have an episode on that type of era. I'm still working on getting in that era myself, because I'm very much a go, do it myself, gotta have control over everything type of person. And being able to just kind of receive, it doesn't come natural to everyone, right? So I think it can be a little bit harder. But I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed making it. I'm not gonna lie. Sitting down, writing notes on like how to be a villain, I felt villainous just doing that. I really enjoyed this. I hope you did too. I hope you got a lot out of it. And if you want more content like this, definitely be sure to join me over on Patreon, Become a Cosmic Cousin. We have a great time over there. And if you want to keep up with me on the daily, then definitely follow me on Instagram at theastrolotus. A lot of you send me messages on Instagram about how much you're enjoying the podcast and enjoying the episodes. And I appreciate you so much, but also leave me reviews, because that really helps. So yeah, leave the review. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe and follow. And I will see you in the next one. Take care and keep on shining.